Guys, welcome to The Disruptors, the show where we get people thinking about a bigger future. Today, Moriba Jah's doing right that. Doing just that. Thanks for coming today, Moriba.
Oh, thank you very much.
So I saw somewhere that you were referenced as the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for space. There's got to be a story.
Yeah, so basically, what that's all about is that one of the things that I'm trying to do here at UT Austin is have a transdisciplinary education and research program where people in law school, we have a Lyndon B. Johnson, public affairs and government aspect on campus. We have Strauss Security and law, aerospace engineering. So what I want is for all these folks to be able to get their own degrees, but have some educational program where all of us take like the dark arts class together. And that way, the next person that is working on Capitol Hill knows what a telescope looks like. The next astronomer that cares about space debris knows how difficult it is to achieve consensus, to get policy out the door, and that sort of thing.
Basically, people are way too specific and we're becoming idiot savants, so to speak, so it's hard to survive.
Exactly. That's right.
How do we solve that? That's not at all where we're going to go with the interview, but how do we solve that as somebody who is working at universities where we really have this one track type system for every student?
So one of the things that some universities are really looking into are, these sort of portfolio educational programs. So here at UT, they have these things called graduate portfolios, where a group of faculty of different departments and schools and colleges can say, we're going to teach these classes, and this is how we're going to admit students into this program, and they'll get some annotation on their degree that says they did a graduate portfolio in space safety, security, and sustainability, for instance. And at least that gets people of all these different degree programs to sit together and take some common classes.
And the space deal is big for you. When did space become your driving force?
I think the seed of that really germinated when I was in active duty as an enlisted person in Montana guarding nuclear missiles at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And one of the things that they say about Montana is that it's big sky country, that's for sure, because there was a lot of sky. And during my night shifts, sometimes I'd look above and I'd see these dots of light just going across the sky, and quite a few of them. And, they weren't shooting stars, they weren't, airplanes. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, wow, these things are actual like human-made satellites orbiting the Earth. And I think there was a kind of a moment of amazement and kind of a shift in me. And that definitely said, hey, I'd be really cool if I did something related to this.
But you were super disappointed initially when you found out they weren't UFOs, right?
Exactly.
It's interesting. Looking up is always a interesting and pretty much universal way to find some type of meaning. Is that kind of what your work has been about for you?
Pretty much. And what does looking up tell us about, our home? What does looking up tell us about, ourselves? And almost looking at how we behave in the skies, using that as a mirror to know ourselves a little bit better and do a better job here on the ground in really achieving sustainability and peace and all these things.
In a creepy way, a lot of it is a mirror. A lot of the satellites are looking down. What are your thoughts on the state of the satellite industry today, where we are, where we're headed?
I really think that there's a big gold rush type activity, bonanza, a lot of money to be made by space-based assets. A lot of the things that we depend upon on a daily basis are becoming more and more space-based capabilities, even the internet itself soon. And because of this gold rush thing, I just see, space commerce booming. People trying to launch as many satellites as possible, as quickly as possible, because even though people can't lay claim to a specific part of space because it's a global commons kind of thing. Um, People can, by all intents and purposes, do squatters' rights, and once you occupy an orbital region and you populate it with a lot of stuff, it's not easy for other people to share that space with you.
Do we need to have parking tickets? Do we need to have um, parking lots that you can rent out? How do we deal with something like that? Because otherwise it becomes
Yeah.
a situation where it's like, we all kind of own the forest, so let's go cut them all down and burn all the trees.
Yeah, so we definitely face a tragedy of the commons in space. I think the first thing that needs to happen is for the global community to accept that near Earth space is a finite resource. We only put objects in certain, space highways, and that we're putting more stuff there, and most of the stuff on the highways doesn't come back. So accept, yep, it's a finite resource, and then once we accept it's a finite resource, then we can make these analogies with this kind of tragedy of the commons and say it's a resource that is in need of environmental protection. So extend current environmental protection narratives to near Earth space. And then once we can do that, then we can start wrapping kind of sensible norms of behavior, values, ethics, with best practices to really ensure that sort of sustainability. I think that there needs to be accountability. So there needs to be three things. There needs to be transparency, accountability, and predictability. And that's part of what we're trying to work here in the research program at UT.
I mean, it could even be like a city system of just renting a parking spot on the side of a road. You put money in, you get your slotted time, the money's used to maintain the roads, etc.
Well, the whole parking thing, it's not a one-to-one analogy given the physics because things are just always in motion kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean basically, if we could have environmental protection extended to nearer space, and we could have a way to quantify the burden of any given object, like one of the things we're developing is a space traffic footprint, which is a kind of a carbon footprint analog, and assign that to every object in space, then it's much more easy it's easier to then tax people or any number of things.
And then at the same time, we've pretty much failed miserably with Paris Accords, Kyoto Principle, essentially carbon tax. People don't like to penalize themselves. How do we do it?
So I think instead of doing penalties, I think what we try to do is incentivize. What kind of things can we put in place to incentivize people to behave this way? Credits that we could provide, better, cheaper access. Maybe it's like, oh, you did all these things, then the cost of this may be reduced for you, or smaller fees, take the usual fees, but give discounts. So I think that's probably a better way, is incentivize versus penalize.
So then
At least at first.
So that would be something like government subsidizing launches or something to that effect.
It could be.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting problem that not a lot of people are talking about. How close are we to a Kessler syndrome scenario? And explain for the listeners what that is.
Yeah, so this idea of Kessler syndrome was something proposed by Don Kessler, in which the hypothesis was, there are on orbit processes and events that further generate, resident space objects. And in a more pragmatic way, what I'm saying is that if you don't do anything, things will collide with each other, or things will break up on their own, or they will explode. And anytime these events happen, they create more things. And Don Kessler said that at some point, the population will be self-growing, even if you don't launch anything else. So some people believe we've already passed that point. I'm not a firm believer in the Kessler syndrome to begin with. I think that, sometimes things get small enough to where the ecosystem achieves some level of equilibrium. So at some point, these collisions between things cease to be harmful or something that could be detrimental. So yeah.
Interesting. Where do space scientists stand on that? I'd never heard that proposed before, but it certainly is a much more hopeful outlook.
I think there's mixed feelings about the whole Kessler syndrome. I think most people that are vocal say that they believe in it, and then maybe some folks that are less vocal about it, like myself, yeah, don't subscribe to it too much.
I mean, in theory, if you did have a Kessler type situation, could you also just put up a space airbag, so to speak, and catch and release everything?
Well, the thing is, if you came up with something like that, or like a Nerf ball or whatever, you wouldn't be able to discriminate things that work from things that are junk. So
You'd have to take it all down.
that's right.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Where do you see us headed when it comes to space? I know one of your big initiatives was crowdsourced space monitoring, and yet we also see a lot more happening on the private side of things as public governments run away from spending money in space.
So like, where do I see the crowdsource thing going, or
where do you see the future of space going? Is it private? Is it a combination of crowdsourced? Where do governments play a role? Just spitball and where you see us headed long term.
I think it's probably very similar to maritime. You have private activity on the seas. You have government activity. You have commercial activity. So it's just it's just an extension of human activity. I think space is going to become that. It's going to become kind of normal, commonplace for us to live or do work in the space domain. Again, just like any other domain, maritime, land, air, sea kind of thing.
What do you think about space piracy? It's pretty easy to, I mean, in the sea, it's almost impossible to disappear unless you've got that 20,000 leagues under the sea type deal. But in space, you can kind of disappear whatever you want to disappear to. It's hard. It's also hard to intercept people.
Yeah, I would say that space piracy is probably a thing. I can guarantee that it's happened, and it's going to happen more frequently in the absence of, kind of ubiquitous monitoring of what's going on orbit.
What applications have you most excited in terms of economic and then human impact of what we're doing right now, and then future space exploration, asteroid mining, etc.?
So to me, being able to use satellites to connect space weather, space environment phenomena with geophysical processes like, hurricanes, earthquakes, that sort of stuff, kind of doing a multi-domain, fusion to try to really understand causal relationships between stuff, so that you can build models that help you better predict what's going to happen, and you have these models, and they're repeatable and that sort of stuff. I think that's what has me most excited. Hopefully, not too late to do something about it. Like with climate change and that sort of stuff. But basically, use space-based technology to, no kidding, improve the lives of humans and animals and all life in general on the planet, and actually achieve sustainability. So that's my most exciting kind of use of space, as opposed to most people that want to leave and go someplace else. But at the same time, the Earth is finite amount of land and water and resources, and the number of humans is not decreasing, and it hasn't reached stability either. So to me, that says we need to figure out how we can survive as a species on places other than Earth. So that nut needs to get cracked. And so there's a role for human exploration as well, if for no other reason than the eventual survival of our species.
Do you think that will be on other planets, or that will be in space station type deals?
I don't have a strong feeling. What I can say is this: if it happens in space station type deals, we need to figure out how to provide adequate resistant forces for our bodies. So, as things are in orbit, everything's in a state of free fall and weightlessness. And we know that weightlessness is detrimental to our bodies because we're used to fighting the resistance of the ground. And I purposely say, there's lots of gravity on orbit. Anybody that says this zero gravity stuff is it's ridiculous. It's completely inaccurate. But we need resistant forces. And so that's the thing that planetary bodies can provide. is that fight against the local acceleration, with the ground. So we definitely need that if we're going to survive. We can't survive in weightlessness for sure. Not long term.
I know sci-fi solves it generally with rotational habitats.
Right, but that's now moving parts and mechanisms, and it complicates stuff. And what kind of redundancy do you put in to make sure that the thing never fails? And where does the energy come from? And so that's just another headache that you need to deal with.
Do you get called in for a private industry a lot to consult?
I do get called in to consult quite a bit. Yeah.
What's it like playing that? Because you're in the academic space, and yet the space is booming and it's the Wild West, so to speak, like you said. What is it like being in that strange balancing position?
It's exactly where I wanted to be. I've spent 7 years working for NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab, and another 10 years as a civil servant in the Air Force Research Lab. I did private industry for a little bit. So I've done a little bit of many things, and now I'm in academia, and I've been resistant to just going and working for a company because I want to be at that intersection. I want to be a resource to people and to different communities. And there have been lucrative opportunities that I've said no to be in this space.
And yet the government's cut NASA's funding. We see so much money going to private industry, and Trump wants his space force. How do we deal with building out the government's role in a long-term space future, not just for the U.S. but worldwide?
I think one of the things that folks like myself can do is just show people what art of the possible looks like, and show a path to move things from art of the possible to state of practice. And I think the major role of government is to retire risk, and then show the government that it actually is possible to do that risk retirement. Because once risk is retired, then it makes sense to commercialize, and have government be very good at just handing things off to private industry when that risk has been retired.
So basically, the government does the lean startup type testing, although.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way it should be, man. For sure.
And then private industry is what scales it up.
Yep.
What do you think in terms of asteroid mining? I know that's something that is pretty hot these days. We've had a couple failures, some larger failures as well. But in terms of getting resources, would you bring them back to Earth, or would you try to build out the infrastructure for space to avoid the gravity issue?
So I think the bringing it back to Earth isn't the worst idea, as long as you had a lot of different fail safes and that sort of thing. I think, to me, the larger worry is depending on the type of resources that you'd be mining, what does that do to the global economy? All of a sudden, if you find something that's made out of platinum, what does that do to the price of platinum kind of stuff? Like, what kind of disruption does that do to a global market? And I think we should think extremely carefully about that, because there could be, very detrimental consequences as a result of doing that, without having that, without being mindful about that.
There definitely could be, but at the same time, you also don't want to be the South African diamond company that's hiding the diamonds to keep the prices high.
Right.
It's a tricky balance.
It is.
Especially because we don't know what we'll find.
Exactly.
What do you think in terms of the public's perception of space and science? We have satellites looking down on the Earth taking pictures, and we have people who believe that the Earth is flat.
Yeah, so that is a very, very large dynamic range of beliefs. And to me, it's mesmerizing to think that we do have folks that are on both sides of that spectrum, right? So I think in general, we still idolize space. It's still a place that's far away, that's unreachable. When we look at paintings and drawings, especially those that are of religious nature, it's where deities reside, right? And it's not a place for humans. So I think that's built in. That's like an ingrained kind of thing that as a collective species, we just need to be open to allowing beliefs to change as needed. And one of the things that, again, that I want to do is I want to make space less of this place for elitists to thrive, less of this faraway place that is inaccessible, and more of just an extension of human activity. We don't idolize people that go on planes or boats or trains. So we shouldn't idolize people that go up on rockets. Like we should as quickly as possible move away from that idolization and just normalize it and just make it kind of a commonplace sort of thing. And also, when we talk to the public, not try to dumb things down for people. Like, I'm tired of people telling me, oh, you just need to dumb it down so people can understand. I actually believe people can understand a lot. I mean, I'm a person, you're a person. To say that we have people whose IQ is so far and above that these other people, the lay people, they won't get it. I just think we just need to find the proper words, and we can find ways to communicate effectively without dumbing things down. Like the zero gravity thing that I brought up earlier. This is something that NASA's been telling people and school kids for such a long time, man. I've even heard NASA people that actually believe this stuff, which to me is like completely ludicrous, And the thing is, it's like if you take a ball with a string and you're spinning the ball, right? That ball goes around in the circle. Gravity is that string. The fact, if there was no gravity, it's like snip it off with some scissors. What happens to the ball? It goes flying away. And so when I talk to school kids, and the school kids are like, astronauts float in the space station because there's no gravity, it's very hard for them to understand physics in other ways because that is a fundamentally flawed way to think about it. But as soon as I tell a group of school kids, hey, it's really free fall. Well, what do you mean by that? Imagine if we were all in this room and we were at the edge of a cliff and you just nudge the room right off the edge of the cliff and the room and everything inside it is just falling but never hits the ground. It's like this bottomless kind of cliff. What do you think would happen? Things would start to look like they're floating and blah, blah, blah. I said, exactly. And that's exactly what astronauts are experiencing, is this constant state of free fall. Basically, they're constantly falling towards the Earth, but they're moving so fast horizontally that they're always missing. They're always missing. And to see children, their eyes light up and they have this aha moment, and all of a sudden they're able to grasp other ideas about physics because they have that's the right way to think about it. So I think, don't dumb things down. Trust that people are smart enough to get it. Just find a way to communicate effectively. Normalize the domain so that it's not this kind of, only rock stars and elitists and that stuff are able to participate in that domain.
What do you think about the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos pissing contest to see who can win space or who can win the race? They seem to have it's very much a billionaire-centric game right now.
So I think that in general, the existence of these folks has been of a positive nature for the community because it's made space more accessible. It's made people believe more that they can be a part of it. So that's been the positive thing. There have been some negatives in the sense that, in general, if it's legal, then it's okay to do it without deep thought about how this affects the rest of humanity and that sort of thing. So I understand the whole try to be an inspiration to people, make them believe. Like, I like that part. I like that technology has been a disruptor and has forced governments to, get a bit shaken out of some of the lethargy and apathy that they've experienced over a long time in space. But I go back to this concept called traditional ecological knowledge, right? It's basically some indigenous people of the planet for thousands of years, like Inuit and Aborigines and other, they have had to strike a balance with their ecosystem to be able to survive. And there's some tenets of traditional ecological knowledge that I think we should apply to space, like mutual respect for each other. Like before you put up a Tesla, think about what people that don't have Teslas would think about seeing a Tesla in space. Just things that say, this domain isn't just about being able to do whatever I want, but there's a humanity that I have to respect in my actions and that sort of thing.
But let's play the devil's advocate card of what about just the importance of getting people more interested in space? Right now, you said you don't want astronauts to be celebrities, but we've got basketball players as celebrities. Would you rather have kids aspiring to be a basketball player or an astronaut?
I'd love people to aspire to be even a plumber if need be. It's like I just think that in general, the sensationalization of any given thing, skewing it kind of thing, is just it's not positive. And it sets up kind of long-term ingrained biases that are just very difficult for us to shake out of in the future.
I would agree. I would also say that is part of the reason the anti-science movement is so effective is because a lot of scientists hold similar beliefs. So we have a lot less marketing or exposure, so to speak, of science popularization.
Understood. I guess I don't have what the right answer is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So you talked about the cost coming down and the abilities of people to do things, possibly terrible things, which kind of brings up geoengineering. We talked about climate change. What do you think about some of the proposals people are talking about, spraying sulfur and otherwise into the atmosphere to slow global warming?
I think that we don't have enough data to really know what that is going to end up long term. And so I think it's arrogance for people to think that they understand these processes, natural processes, and the impact of their actions to the extent that they could predict what these effects could be like over centuries and millennia. I think it's ludicrous. Like it's a horrible mentality because it's just not true. Man, we can't even predict the weather in a city, over a couple days, let alone, putting stuff in the atmosphere and saying, yeah, this is the way it's going to behave 100 or 1,000 years from now.
I would agree. I would say the weather thing not as relevant because it's the averages, but the geoengineering thing it's terrifying because any billionaire is going to be able to do this. And what happens once we start doing it? If we decide it's not working, or for some reason it's going to stop, or it does stop, or someone says, "Oh, we can hold you hostage now. I need $1 billion a day, or I'm just going to yada yada yada." There's just so many ways it could go wrong outside of the ways that we don't even know that we don't know.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any way that we can prevent against that? Some type of treaty? If someone tries to do it, we just shoot them down?
Yeah, so I'll probably never say yes to that. But certainly, back to this idea of traditional ecological knowledge, one of the tenets of that is, taking people's perspectives into account prior to making any decisions, and basically using empirical data to understand, relationships between things and making, informed decisions, not making assumptions to fill in the gaps of incomplete data, because whenever we extrapolate that way, typically it doesn't end up so well. So yeah.
You're basically talking about dynamic or systems type thinking,
That's
type
right.
processes. We don't have a lot of that in school, and I think that's one of the most important things we're going to need going forward.
I agree.
If you had to kill one school subject in high school and replace it with something else, what would it be and why?
That's a really, really tough question. If I had to get rid of any given subject in school, it would probably be history. The reason I would get rid of it is because it's a biased account. Like, if history as taught today would actually be a combination of opinions of a given event or a process where you get different perspectives, I think that could be actually worthwhile. But as some people say, history books get written by the people who won, sort of thing, and is just a very biased lens to look at how things have happened, and I think that actually can be detrimental long term to the way we think about things, for sure.
I think it can be, but while history doesn't repeat itself, it often rhymes. So it's good to know what to look for as well. I would probably try to combine classes instead, looking at ways. Well, it's silly to have separate subjects when English could also be sci-fi class, could also be history class, because you know what, you're reading things in history. There's just a lot of ways I think that we could refine the system.
Sure.
Any thoughts as a college educator?
I really enjoy transdisciplinarity, and so working on projects that the answer only comes from the fusion of many disciplines, like what I'm doing now with space safety, security, and sustainability. I think that's definitely a way of the future.
It definitely is a way of the future, and yet it's something that's hard to get people on board for today. Like you were saying, and like you see with Tragedy of the Commons, a lot of times people don't act until they have to react.
Right.
Is there any way that we can prevent that going forward with space?
Man, well, that's one of the things that I'm trying to do is trying to raise awareness and get people to take some action in protecting the space environment before, a really cataclysmic event actually happens in that domain. We'll see.
See, this is where I think sensationalism could be valuable. Even, like, let's say you partner with Elon Musk, he creates a fake 3D video of a Tesla going and running through the streets, crashing into cars and killing tons of people. And then at the end, by the way, this would be space if we didn't clean it up. Or something like that. I don't know how else you can really get people to have that type of visceral reaction that's needed.
Yeah, but I've also seen where sensationalism is the culprit of people just becoming non-believers and saying fake this, fake that, fake the other. And so I have a huge inertia to using that as a mechanism to get my message across to people.
You talked about space changing beliefs, especially religious beliefs. Do you believe there's intelligent life out there?
Um, the answer is absolutely. If we consider ourselves intelligent, then I don't see any other way that there couldn't be, because so far in my own scientific pursuits, I've never seen nature do one-offs. So I've seen nature do things that are repeatable in other places, and so to think that we resulted as this miraculous kind of spoof kind of thing, yeah, I find that very difficult to accept.
What do you think would happen if we had contact in some way?
I mean, everything about us would change, right? I mean, our whole perspectives about what our role is in the universe, and understanding more about, what we can do, where we came from, like all these things would change, and maybe it would be a way to achieve greater harmony. It would be very difficult for some to accept, right? They might feel that they're being purposely tricked. I mean, if people still believe the Earth is flat, some people would deny the existence of these other beings and say they're just, who knows, in disguise, demons or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be super interesting. It could definitely be unifying, especially if it was a us against them mentality, which a lot of times is very helpful. Hence wars. But it's it's hard to really predict what would happen.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever say that a war is a helpful thing, but yeah,
Or it's like 9/11. No one was friendlier in New York City other than after 9/11. That was the most unified time there's ever been, because everyone went through a tragedy.
unfortunately, yeah.
Hmm. It's yeah, I could see something similar being along those lines. Then again, if we ever encountered another species and they came here, obviously our technology wouldn't stand a chance. So all the sci-fi movies are usually kind of bogus on that regard. How do you think when you watch? Speaking of, when you watch movies, when you read books, etc., when the science isn't quite right, does that bother you? Do you suspend disbelief? How do you deal with that as a science guy?
So to me, it needs to be like fully bogus or fully realistic. Yeah, I don't like the in-between stuff. So, something like Star Wars, I can totally get into it, and I love it because it is kind of fully bogus. Um, but then some other movies where they try to make it pseudo realistic, that's where it bugs me. Like movies like Gravity or whatever. Like I don't like that.
I can definitely relate to that. You gotta go one way or the other with that.
Yeah.
When did you know that you were going to be a scientist?
Well, I'd probably say ever since I actually felt a genuine curiosity to understand stuff around me, and I would find ways to test those things and test beliefs and that sort of thing. I think at that point, I didn't fully know it, but that's really when I started becoming a scientist.
And then you progressed from there. What was it like working at NASA and also being a TED Fellow, being around some of the smartest folks in the world?
Yeah, so this belief, working at JPL, it took me several years to even feel like I was worthy to be working, alongside some of these people whose papers I had read as a student and that sort of thing. Uh, the TED Fellow experience was uniquely one of the most amazing experiences I've had professionally, in that, like all these other 19 people, we had a common unifying element, which was we all seemed to be motivated by compassion and wanting to do something of positive impact for humanity. And we all had a thing that we could point to. My thing is space traffic. Yvonne's thing is women in the police force, and all of us had a thing that we were doing, something that we could point to,
A
and
purpose.
yeah, and that was just so powerful, man. And I think that's really the most awesome part of the TED Fellowship, to be honest.
I feel like so many people don't have a purpose or have lost their purpose, and that's a big portion of the problem with the world. How do we fix that?
I wish I had a meaningful answer to give to you for that. I don't know.
What do you think about the public research partnership that goes on with the military and science?
I think it could be improved. Um, I think there's a lot of confirmation bias built into a lot of this stuff, and I don't see enough. You know,
What do you mean by that?
what I mean is that, um, the government will say, I have this problem, and people will say, I have this shiny object that'll solve it, but, well, how do you know it solves it? Well, because I tested it with this, that, and the other. Well, if you use this other, data, how does it perform? Well, that's not fair because, I didn't develop it with that. And so there's no standard like benchmark data sets that are transparent. There's no group of people that can independently provide, peer review and scrutiny of different solutions and that sort of stuff. So to me, that's the biggest Achilles heel of these things is the absence of that.
Well, it's the same thing with social media and news. It's what news is real. It's hard when it comes to data, especially when depends on who's funding it, depends on how you looked at it. The data
That's right.
sometimes changes.
That's right.
I feel like that's a problem with science as a whole, in that that's why so many people disbelieve it, is scientists aren't willing to say this is true. They're willing to say this isn't false. Can we fix that somehow in terms of public perception? Because charlatans are willing to say anything that's true.
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer that is in a quote from Bertrand Russell, and Bertrand Russell's quote that to me addresses this is the problem with the world is that the stupid are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt.
I like it. That's a solid one. What technology or trend are you most excited about outside of the stuff we've talked about so far?
To me, it's big data science and analytics, man. It's what can we learn by aggregating and properly curating large quantities of disparate sources of information. What's discoverable in that set. Um, to me, that's the most fascinating kind of thing moving out into the future.
And yet it's a double-edged sword. I've heard you talk about the dangers of monitoring, especially with all the satellites that are going up, the increased resolution, facial recognition.
Yeah, it is a double-edged sword. That's right.
Are we moving towards a privacy-free world?
I just don't see any way around it. I think that it's something that can't be fully protected. And there's interestingly enough, some people say, well, how do I, if myself and my research group, if we are really like, world class kind of stuff, like how do you ensure that you're like leading edge? Some people would say you remain insular and you don't share anything, which is a lot of governments and that sort of stuff. And other people would say you put everything out there and you just run much more, you outpace, everything else. You saturate the system with everything that you're doing. And that's my approach. My approach is not hiding stuff. It's putting everything out there and saturating the system with it. So to me, that's the way I approach this whole privacy stuff, is that I just put everything about me out there. It's like, and the system can either keep up or not.
Isn't that, not to be rude, but isn't that a little bit of a privileged position where some people can't do that?
I won't say no.
Yeah, it's a really hard balance to strike, because we are moving in a direction which feels like a slippery slope we can't stop.
Understood.
Yeah, IoT, AI, sensors, satellites. I've got my camera right here. Zuckerberg's watching. He probably gets to see the other webcam that I've got going on. It's
But I think the biggest problem is the lack of transparency and the lack of privacy. So when there's lack of transparency and lack of privacy, that's where the problem is. But if there's lack of privacy with full transparency, then people can see how other people are using that lack of privacy for their own purposes, and we can call each other out, and we can kind of self-police ourselves as a community. But the thing is, that's not the case. It's like there's lack of privacy and lack of transparency. And the lack of transparency is what makes it dangerous.
And on top of that, lack of repercussions. Facebook.
Exactly.
These are our terms. Right. Oh, by the way, we changed all of our terms. Sorry.
Right. So I think the lack of transparency is exactly what results in the lack of consequences.
But even still, now we're starting to have more and more transparency into this lack of privacy, and we don't see people's priorities or actions really changing much.
I think there's going to be a tipping point with people just becoming very allergic to a lack of consequences. And when you can have a sufficiently large and convincible body of evidence of causality between this person's privacy was completely like out there and you completely took advantage of it in this way, that, or the other, and it resulted in this thing to the detriment of the person, when that's clear cut and there's only one hypothesis that fits that, then I think it's easier to enforce and come up with consequences.
I would definitely agree with that. When your neighbor gets in the car crash, you think a lot harder about having the seatbelt on.
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of times it does take those type of actions. I want to jump to the lightning round now. Some rapid fire questions. Sound good?
Okay.
And guys, if you go to disruptors.fm/Patreon, support us at a level of $5 or more per month, you unlock all the bonus episodes, all of our bonus lightning rounds, and some additional free stuff. Back to the interview itself. What's something I should have asked you about that I just haven't?
Something that you should have asked me that you did not. I'm coming up blank, my friend.
That's very good. That means I must have done a halfway decent job. What's the most exciting thing you've seen in the past week?
Well, we just released the first near real-time, near-miss prediction service out on the internet, and nobody's done that before. And so I'm actually looking at it right now on my screen, and that's the most exciting thing, because it'll give people an awareness of how close we predict a lot of these objects to come to each other. And I'm not even using all the objects we track, just using a couple thousand, and there are a lot of near misses happening.
When you say near misses, do you mean satellites in space, or do you mean the asteroids that want to say hi and give us a little smack?
I mean satellite, things, human-made objects orbiting the Earth, coming within 5 kilometers or 3 miles from each other.
If we get an impact, would we be able to see that type of stuff from Earth? Without a telescope?
Probably not without a telescope. I mean, if you're seeing it without a telescope, then it's really huge impact, like space station coming apart, which we hope kind of never happens. But yeah, you'd probably wouldn't be able to see it with your naked eye.
That was a really dumb question on my part. I got one.
So
I got one last question for you, Moriba, and
yeah.
that before you tell people where to find you and all the good stuff. And that's if you had to leave people with one thing, a quote, a call to action, something like that. It can be anything. What would it be and why?
I would probably want people to walk away with consider that near Earth space is a finite resource that is in need of environmental protection, and we should look towards groups of people on the planet that have found a way to achieve balance with their environment over thousands of years, and we should use that um, as kind of a recipe of how to apply that in space.
Okay, I have a follow up question on that. What got you? Because you've brought it up a couple of times now. What made that so apparent for you? The importance of not just ecological sustainability, but looking at it from an ancient or a wise in the world in the environment type sense.
So that's the question that you didn't ask me. So yeah, that I'm glad that you asked it. Um, a couple years ago, I went to Alaska and I took my son Denali with me so that he could see where his name came from. And um, I've lived in Hawaii on Maui for a number of years, so I've seen the disparity between Native Hawaiians and the rest of us, kind of thing, um, and how it's affected their lives, and actually the environment with landfills and that sort of stuff on Maui. You go to Australia, you see how Aborigines have been displaced and that sort of stuff, and the impact to their environment as well. Went to Alaska, saw that firsthand as well, Pacific Northwest. And um, interestingly enough, I felt suddenly kind of enveloped by a presence, and it was like a feeling, a presence that felt very old to me, and uh, like in my mind's eye, I saw all these things kind of flashing, and what I felt within me was there are groups of people on the planet that uh, have for thousands of years, again, been able to achieve sustainability and balance, and humanity as a whole has lost its balance with life. And would I be willing to do anything in my capacity to try to rekindle that, to try to recover that, and make that a foundational message in my work? And my answer is yes. And so that's exactly what I've done.
I think that's really cool, and it's interesting that you're able to have both perspectives. Usually people go one way or the other, and usually the values when you combine both.
Absolutely.
Moriba, thanks for coming today. Where's the best place for people to find you and learn more about the work?
Yeah. So basically, I think if you just Google my first name, Moriba Jah and space junk, you'll find so much on me online. You'll make your way there. So
The benefits of having an epic, unique name.
there you go.
Moriba, thanks for coming, and thanks for tuning in, guys.
All right. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers, and until next time, guys, look up, see what you see, and then build something bigger because of it. Peace.